Nickelodeon. Nickelodeon.
There are a lot of things to say about modern Nickelodeon, mostly bad things, but every single channel has a history behind it. Nick's standing in the animation world may have changed for the worse today, though they've been extremely impactful on the industry throughout their massive journey on TV. One of the things you'll immediately associate with the network is the iconic Nickelodeon jingle. You know the one. Seriously, it doesn't matter your age, it'll be hard to find someone who's never heard that song before. This was the jingle of several different generations, and it has always existed in some way or another since its creation. But despite everyone being all too familiar with this classic tune, there are a few mysteries surrounding it that not as many people know. What's the origin behind the jingle? Why was it specifically chosen to repeat Nickelodeon instead of being just a normal instrumental theme song? There are some questions surrounding this, and today, let's dive in to figure out what really went down more than 30 years ago. Let's adventure back towards the 80s, home of many things, especially aesthetic things. Nickelodeon of course existed in this time period, but they were just getting used to kids TV, and they weren't necessarily doing as successful as you'd expect. When we're talking the iconic jingle, it pretty much all started with these two guys, Fred Seibert and Alan Goodman. They formed a team called Fred Allen, and they have their own archived website of what they've gone through over at Nickelodeon. In 1984, they started working with executives to turn the channel around from low ratings to high ratings, but how exactly could they even do that? Well, they thought that Nick's presentation didn't really appeal too much to kids, which is the main target audience. That's why these guys decided to do something a bit more fun that they thought everyone would have a good time listening to. They decided on creating a jingle, especially since they'd been thinking about old ones on the radio for a few years. Eventually, they were introduced to a man going by the name Eugene Pitt. He was said to be the most underrated soul singer in America, and he was the founding member of doo-wop group The Jive 5.
We talked to kids all over the nation. They told us who deserved nominations. Kids cast their ballots at their favorite store, or sending letters of whom they're voting for.
When Fred and Alan thought of the idea of creating this catchy jingle for kids that involved doo-wop, the execs weren't too excited. They didn't think it would be a good idea because the genre was pretty old at this point, and it probably wouldn't appeal to the target audience. But around this time, with Nickelodeon having some of the worst ratings in America, it was easy to understand that there weren't too many options. The execs knew they didn't have a lot to work with. In Fred's perspective, here's exactly how he and Alan convinced them. Typically, I was a bit academic, playing on the executive's inclinations. Alan and I love all forms of African American music, and using doo-wop will be a great way to educate American kids without anyone being the wiser. Alan went right for it. He opened his mouth and, quoting the Marcel's arrangement of Chestnut Blue Moon, sang bum 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 ding a dong ding. What kid isn't going to love that right away? Alan asked. Case closed. Their number one goal was to turn things around and make sure that kids watching would understand what was happening and stay on the channel instead of switching. With the doo-wop tune these guys decided to pursue, it was clear that they were on the right track. The Jive 5 was here to accomplish all their musical needs. Of course, the Nickelodeon jingle wasn't the only thing that would be made around this time. It couldn't just play on the channel with a black screen, right? That's why a team of animators worked together to turn the Jive 5's voices into really amazing bumpers that would air on the channel between TV shows. These bumpers would often feature several characters singing, or some strange but aesthetic visuals that constantly moved and kept the audience's attention.
Nickelodeon, Lodion, ooh.
These types of bumpers have always been loved, not only because of their incredible jingle that's still known to this very day, but because of how kid-friendly they were. Like I said before, the channel's presentation wasn't as good as it could be, though these bumpers changed everything. In his own words, here's how Fred puts it. There was no money for programming or advertising, so all the work needed to be done by the airtime on the channel itself. Nonetheless, our efforts succeeded in bringing Nickelodeon from worst to first in the ratings within 6 months, and Nickelodeon remains America's #1 cable network of any kind, behind earning billions of dollars and making millions of kids happy. But after knowing all this, you might be wondering why exactly they chose to say Nickelodeon over and over again as the channel's theme song. Well, for one reason, that's how Doo-wop goes. But if you want to get more specific as to why Nickelodeon and not any other word, it's probably because kids weren't very familiar with what that even was. Nickelodeon is directly connected to the first kind of movie theater, which came out in the early 1900s, but kids growing up aren't gonna know anything about that. By having this incredibly catchy tune that plays on the channel and constantly says the word Nickelodeon, you don't need to know anything about the word or the history. Instead, you can just sing along and recognize it being the channel name. Repetition also worked because it got inside your head, much like any other kinds of songs and commercials you see today. I will always hold a special place in my heart for the Nickelodeon of the 80s. With help from some outside people, this channel was able to turn around in a short time period through a jingle that everyone would remember. It's a time in the network's history that not as many people know about today, but just think about it. There's a very real chance that if Fred and Alan hadn't stepped in with their ideas to bring Doo-wop to Nick, we very much might not have the channel today. So now, the next time you hear the jingle you associate with some of your favorite Nicktoons, you can think about how it may have just saved the entire channel from shutting down. That's really cool. But anyway, that's all for this video. Subscribe for more awesome cartoon videos. Give a thumbs up and comment below, let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.